I've got yet another person asking for like evidence that I am who I say I am, which is kind of fair enough in a way, but some people won't accept my reasons.
I also get some people who, if I share an incorrect fact
Mm.
or an incomplete fact, will be like, "That's wrong. Do better." It's like,
Yeah.
bitch, this is not a National Geographic documentary. It's TikTok. Relax.
But it's like I just feel like they're trying to bait me into kind of giving them something so they can like dox my work or some shit like that, you know?
Maybe. And I also find the audacity of these people to think
Yeah,
that you owe them anything.
yeah. And
Like I come across that on Reddit a lot where people will ask for like,
mm,
I'll make a comment about how I've been married for 22 years and they'll be like, well, prove that your husband isn't a simp. It's like, how
yeah,
the fuck am I supposed to do that? And why am I going to waste any of my time or energy on
yeah,
you? You
yeah,
think I give a shit about what you think of me or who you are?
yeah. Oh man. And then like being a simp is just so subjective anyway. Like, you know, like there's no real rhyme or reason sometimes.
The whole thing, especially the one, because I've been banned from one
Mhm. Another one.
participating in subreddit.
Yeah.
And the other one is called Purple Pill Debate. And it is absolutely ridiculous. Like every time I see it, it just makes me shake my head. One of the flares on it is change my view. So usually it's men who are posting, make this grand
Mm.
statement about all women
Mm.
and then change my view. And they will fight to the death in the comments. No one's changing their view
No.
because that's not why they're there.
Mm.
But I would say 97% of what gets posted is true for both men and women. But
Yeah.
because they're not seeing it on their side, they think it's just women. So they're like, well, if men are attractive, women will be more receptive to them. It's like, well, first of all, no shit.
Yeah.
Pretty privilege has always been a thing. People only date people to whom they're attracted. That's not a shocker. But also, men feel the same way about women. But a lot of these men in these subreddits forget that unattractive women exist. They forget.
Yeah.
So it's so fucked up. And then you can't, as soon as you say, like, but men do this exact same thing. So, like, we're both guilty of this behavior.
Yeah.
They're like, whatever, whataboutism.
Yeah. But we all, it's a human thing. And it's like, it's actually a relationship between the resources that you, or the perceived resources you can provide the relationship in whatever way, your physical attractiveness and their physical attractiveness in objective terms, as well as subjective.
But this young, and they're like, I fear for a lot of these young men because they have just, so there was a video this young woman had posted. She was in a library and she was, I'm going to guess 18. She was like kind of an attractive girl, but like the typical kind of nerd girl who at the end of the movie, they take off her glasses and give her a better haircut. And all of a sudden she's happy, right? She's one of those. She's the girl before. So this guy comes up to her. He's off frame. She starts recording. She is visibly uncomfortable. Like there's no question that she does not like this interaction. And the guy's like, no, I'm just going to hang by the pool. Like, I don't mean to interrupt you. And she was like, actually, I just need, like, I'm studying. I'm busy. Oh, okay. And then it took a little bit for him to leave. And then she was like, oh. So the guy who posted this video was vilifying her for posting about this guy who was just trying to come up to her, could not read her body language at all. Like not at all did he say like she was obviously uncomfortable. And then the men in the comments, you can't see the guy in this video. She posted the camera to herself. The majority of the men in the comments were like, if he was good looking, she would have nailed him. Yeah, you don't know what he looks like, first of all, because he's off camera. But they, in their heads, they have decided that any woman will sleep with any attractive man.
Which isn't true. There's studies
absolutely
on this.
Not true. Absolutely not true. But they're like, oh, if he was attractive, then she would have nailed it. It's like,
I'll tell you
she
what.
Clearly does not look like the kind of girl who would do that.
They did a study on this, okay, where they got fairly attractive people to do this, and their targets were university age students, the most promiscuous time of your life. Okay, so they would get a man to approach women students and then a woman to approach men students. And all they would ask is, do you want to come back to my place and sleep with me? Something like that, right? I think about the third or half of men said yes to the woman.
75%. That's actually going to be in my next kick-ass fact.
Oh, is it? That's amazing. I actually underestimated it in my memory. But yeah, like hardly, like no women said yes.
Yeah,
and it didn't matter
of
how
men said
attractive
yes,
the man. Yeah.
And most women were like telling the guys, don't talk to me, be a creep. And I think that men, it's very different how men and women approach relationships. And I think the challenge, like men keep crying on Purple Pill debate about the lack of empathy that women have for men, but they also aren't demonstrating any empathy for women.
Exactly.
Because as soon as women try to say this is what we experience because of men who do this, instead of listening to the experiences those women have had, they immediately say, well, it's not all men. So they shut it down. But they don't see in that instance that the man who is saying yes is the safer one of the two. Because if a woman's walking up to a man and saying, like, I want you to go back to my apartment, if he says yes, they go back to the apartment, they both enjoy themselves, she leaves. If a woman then is to say yes, she's in a much more vulnerable position because she doesn't know who that man is. And one of the things that has come up, curious about your opinion on this, is where men will sleep with a woman they don't want to pursue a relationship with just because they find that person attractive. Whereas if a woman is seeking a relationship, she's not going to just sleep with a man she's attracted to if she doesn't think it's going to lead to a relationship. And that's one of those things where it's also broken down for these men in this subreddit that they assume that either all women are going to sleep with all men they're attracted to, or they're only going to sleep with men who they have like a financial stake in. Like there's not a single rational or reasonable approach to how women behave on this subreddit.
Yeah, I think my experience of pursuing women for, apart from the last 9 years, most of my adult life, would be that women want different things all the time. And they even want different things at different parts in their lives. And these men are making huge assumptions based on minimal data because most of these guys aren't talking to enough women, right? They're not getting the perspective of what different women want at different times.
Hang on one second, I gotta yell at dogs.
I mean, again, hashtag not all men. Like the kind of men that go to these forums and ask these sorts of questions and have these issues in their lives. A, they're not talking to enough women. B, they don't have the social skills yet because they haven't developed them. And C, like women aren't like an homogenous group. You're a diverse group of people, just like men are. And these guys need to understand that.
And it's the same kind of guys who will be the first ones to jump on Not All Men are the ones who will say, well, I cried in front of a girl once in 1974 and she laughed at me, so I'm never going to cry in front of a woman again. Because they are very quick to be, yes, it's all women, but it's definitely not all men. One guy made a post, this was in a different subreddit, and he said that the question was, how do you handle crying in front of your partner? And his story is he cried in front of his partner and was emotional. She was very supportive. She guided him through, but now he has a problem knowing that she knows that vulnerable side of him. And he thinks whenever they're in an environment where that past trauma of his has the potential to be present, that's all she's going to be thinking about. He's like, how do I deal with that? So it's not even that like his partner was unsupportive. He now can't handle that his partner knows that he
That's
has
an insecure man. He's insecure.
So we watched this documentary. It's a series called Food That Built America. And it goes through the history of yesterday I learned about the history of dog food and dog treats and how that came to be. And it was fascinating, sir. Do you know that Friskies, the cat food, was originally intended for dogs?
Oh, really?
Yes. Anywho, one episode was the beginnings of the grocery store, the modern grocery store, because once upon a time, everything was behind the counter. So you would walk in and tell your grocer, I need these 5 things. The grocer would go collect those 5 things, and then you would leave. So the guy who started, I can't remember which grocery store. It's Piggly Wiggly or a different grocery store. They were getting really busy. So he had to keep hiring more people to fulfill these orders. So he thought, what if we just put the groceries out and let people choose their own groceries, which was a big problem. People didn't like it at first. Then an owner of a franchise started to notice that because they only had small hand baskets, people weren't buying a lot because they couldn't carry the baskets. So he decided, after some trial and error, he was going to put the basket into a trolley that you could wheel around. So if you didn't have to carry the basket, you could buy more shit. This was in 1918. And it failed at first because men refused to push the trolley. They refused to push the trolley because then it would be telling other men in the store that they weren't strong enough to carry their own groceries.
Insecurity.
The only way it took off was he hired beautiful women models to walk into a store, grab a cart and move with it, because then it showed the men like, oh, if women are doing it, then yeah, I can do it, because if I've got a cart and she's got a cart, we can connect. And then it showed it to other women like, oh yeah, I can work it. But men refused to push the trolley because it made other men think they weren't strong enough to carry their own groceries.
Wow, that is insecurity, isn't it? I think it's I mean, and also men, like, we've all been there. I think this is why I can laugh at it, is because it's from a place of experience. Like, at points in my life, I have been a very insecure person. And so, like, when I see, like, this fragile masculinity, I think, that's there now, like, I do find aspects of it quite funny, you know?
I think it's also kind of telling, though, because there are some men who give women a really hard time for being cautious around men. But then it's those same men who won't pick up a trolley because other men will judge them. Like, men are just as afraid of other men as women are, but they just don't see that.
Well, there was something the other day, I can't remember what it was now. I've been trying to think of it the whole podcast episode, and I can't remember what it was. It was perfect for this. But I noticed in the discussion, like in the comments, the stuff that women say about men that women are worried about, and then men are dissing them for. Men are worried about the same fucking stuff and even word it the same way. And they'll generalize women in the same way that women are generalizing men. Like, both sides do it.
Absolutely. Both sides are guilty of the same things.
Yeah. But we act like we don't do that. It's only them.
That's the thing. Whenever it comes up in that purple pill debate, any of those posts that are written by men could be written by a woman if you swap the sex. But they just don't get it. They're not seeing it. Like, well, if he was good looking, she'd be okay with it. It's like, yeah, as would you. If a woman you're not attracted to. And I think maybe this is the difference, because I've seen comments to this effect where a woman will still be polite or friendly with a man she's not attracted to. Yeah. Because she thinks that either because she's a friendly, polite person, or she thinks like we could probably be friends at the end of this. Whereas men will not engage or spend energy on women they don't find attractive. So I think if that's true, that's where the disconnect comes from. And that's why probably men think that when women are nice to them, women are flirting, because those same men won't be nice to a woman they don't want to pursue sexually.
They're projecting. And that's why I think a lot of the times, like, the people complaining about certain things like this, they're worried because they know how they are. Yes. Like, just for example, one of the things that people have to contend with when they develop a severe mental illness, say like schizophrenia or something like that, one of the things they have to process is their own stigma and discrimination that they felt previously towards people with mental illness. And now they've become part of that group they used to vilify and take the piss out of. And now they're like, oh, it's nothing like I thought it was. And then now those people are going to think it about me, when in reality, you're probably just a shitty person and not everybody thinks that way.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that would be a challenge. Oh, there was something else I was going to say as you were talking. I was totally ignoring everything you said, so I wouldn't forget what I said.
Rudeness for no reason.
Ah, damn it. It was something along that same kind of empathy and not understanding the situation. This isn't what I was going to say, but there was a woman many years ago who, prior to this experiment, was already dealing with severe mental health issues. She wanted to go undercover as a man to see what it would be like. She did. And then several months later, she unalived herself. Yeah. So the men who read that study forget the whole part about where she already had significant untreated mental health. And they were just like, see, she was a man for a few months and then killed herself. What the rest of us are going through, not seeing that there was a lot more at play. Like they're very picky and choosy about.
Yeah, she was already ill. Yeah,
she was already very ill and then undertook this activity. Although I imagine it is very different, because when I've spent some time on other subreddits, like there was a woman who she worked at a suicide hotline, and she said there were a number of men who would call saying that they were thinking about ending things, and they were like, I just need a girlfriend to make everything better. And it's like, but that's not the point of your girlfriend. No. Right? You need a therapist. You need to talk somebody through. You can't expect this one person in your life to be that one person. So I engaged in the comments, and there were a lot of men who were like, no, I don't want to talk to my friends about that kind of thing. I don't want to see a therapist because I can't afford to see a therapist. That's why I have a girlfriend. It's like, but that's a lot of pressure to put on one person. That's not why you have a partner, to fix things for you. That's not their point. But men need to start developing deeper and stronger friendships with the men in their lives, or have friendships with women, because you can't keep holding everything in and refuse to talking to anybody about it because this is my fishing buddy. I'm not going to tell my fishing buddy I'm struggling. I'm not going to tell my softball teammate that I'm struggling. Men need more friends.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's like, it's legit to say that about your fishing buddy or whatever, because you're not close friends like that, just acquaintances. You just hang out and go fish. But you need someone that you can talk to that is outside of your relationship. Because like, what if the problem that you had was making you miserable was something that your girlfriend was doing, but your girlfriend is the one that you talk to get these things through, like to figure them out. But then if your girlfriend's the problem, then you're fucked.
And there's a lot of problems that come along with that, because I also see a lot of on relationship subreddits where women are like, I feel guilty. I want to end this relationship because I'm not happy, but I feel guilty because he keeps telling me I'm the only one he can talk to. I'm the only one he can confide in. So now you've turned your girlfriend or your partner into your crutch that you have now almost emotionally guilted into being in a relationship, because they're worried about what you're going to do if they end things.
Yeah. And that's the real bit, I think, where a lot of men like it. In like the manosphere anyway, they talk about, oh, if your bitch sees you cry, then they lose respect for you. And it's like, no, they lose respect for you because of how you deal with things. And if they become your crutch, and it's not the act of crying or being emotional in front of them, it's the fact that you're using them for it. Like they're like, your partner isn't somebody that, you have sex with who makes you dinner and that you cry to. Like your partner should be more than that.
It's scary that that's not the thought process. And like seeing these things, like a lot of them are, why are women going to get married to men anyway when they know that they're just going to drop them in 20 years to find somebody younger? It's like, most people who are married actually like their partners. They actually love that person for more than what they look like or how old they are. But that is really difficult to get across to some of these folks. And when you tell them, like, I've seen it on both sides. If you say like, oh, I'm 25 and I'm experiencing this thing, that's like, well, you're too young. You don't know any better. You're just young and stupid. But if you say I'm 45 and this has been my experience, like, well, you're old and you're out of touch with what's going on right now.
Yeah. You can't wait.
There's never, and it's not, sometimes you have to listen to the sound of experience because you don't know what you don't know. And when I was 25, I mean, I wouldn't have listened to 48-year-old me, but I fucking should have, because 48-year-old me has that experience, but you just assume that no one else is going to get it. No one else understands. But the thought is that, women are just for sex. Like if your woman isn't going to put out, why are you going to be with her? Like this is why dead bedrooms, don't get married because you're going to have a dead bedroom. But there's so much more. A lot of the divorce rates get thrown about in these subreddits, and like women are the ones filing for divorce, where it's twofold. It's happy people don't leave marriages. You may have been happy, but your partner wasn't. There's a reason for that it broke down. But also, what I think has come out, and I don't know the actual numbers of this, is whoever files the paperwork is where they get these metrics from. But even if the man is the one who says, I want a divorce, it's usually the woman
that files it,
who actually files the paperwork. So the numbers are totally skewed.
Yeah. And like at the moment in the States, they're really demonizing and coming for no-fault divorce. Some Republicans are starting to campaign on getting rid of it. And it's like, it's an absolute lifeline to a lot of women in the States because of how puritanical their country is towards the institution of marriage.
They're really trying to trap women again.
Yeah, they really are. Like, it's not happening here.
like a long time ago, women couldn't file for divorce. And then when they were allowed to, divorce skyrocketed and people were like, oh, well, that's just a problem with women. It's like, no, they're finally free of abusive situations. Now that we can have our own bank accounts, we can have jobs and keep our own money. Women aren't marrying as early. They're not marrying men that they need to marry, and men are freaking the fuck out about it instead of just being like, oh, maybe I should be a better person.
And the other thing I find funny about it is that, like, it applies to the men too. And then so these same men are saying, well, why would a woman get married? Because you're probably going to upgrade her in 20 years anyway. Yeah, so do you not think you might need no fault divorce if you're going to be a cunt and do that?
Exactly. One guy even said about, like, women say they're so happy being single, so why doesn't a single mother just wait until her kids turn 18 to start dating again? That way she can avoid potential abusers. It's like, well, because maybe she wants to get laid between that time. Maybe because she wants to be in a relationship. And when women say they would rather, or they're okay being single, that doesn't mean in a lot of cases that they prefer to be single. What it means is they would prefer to be single over being in a shitty relationship.
Yeah,
they can be single and happy versus being forced to be in a relationship and stay unhappy.
And I think that something that men need to realize as well is that the bar for us to make effort to be in a relationship has never been set lower. Like, it's never been easier for men to get ahead in life in terms of just getting a family life and being a responsible adult. Like, we have very few pressures on us compared to past generations. And because of the shitty behavior of men over the last few generations, nobody expects anything from us. Like, that's the sad state it's in, is that so many men are just so in the doldrums, basically, and are so depressed and all this stuff and listless. And it's like you're competing against that for, like...
But a lot of these men too make zero effort.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they make zero effort to be likable, and then they wonder why nobody likes them. Like, if you, I think a lot of these men need to stop blaming. They pull out these random studies that were conducted by, like, dating apps, like shit studies that aren't any better than a Cosmo quiz, and they're holding on to that lifeline instead of being like, oh, maybe it's my personality. That's the problem.
No, they're talking
maybe
about
it's that I haven't never asked a woman out. That they're just rejecting themselves proactively.
And then when they're talking about these biological studies with brain chemicals, it's either on fucking ferrets or bumblebees, and they're applying it to humans.
One of them now is that if a woman has sex with men unprotected, then their DNA is going to get into their DNA and fundamentally affect them. And, like, that study has been proven. When I look up the study, the first photo they show you is a cross-section of a pregnant woman who's pregnant with a male child. And that male child, that's where the DNA comes into play, not your load is, like, hanging off of the side of her vaginal walls. Like,
they basically think that your cum works like an mRNA vaccine.
Yes, it's going to fundamentally change your DNA. One guy posted that when you have that women aren't even born virgins anymore because of what happens in the womb, they already come out not virgins. And if you have a baby with a woman who's not a virgin, then that's not going to be your baby because it's going to have the DNA of all the men who came before you.
Holy shit. Like,
yeah, that's what women are dealing with.
And the worst bit is
absolute ignorance.
The worst part of this is that because this is happening in the digital age, you know, even 20, 30 years ago, Joe Blogs down working in the, like, I don't know, the scrap heap down the road or whatever, he'd have all these weird ideas and people wouldn't pay attention to him. But now, because of the information age we live in, he can now go on Reddit and share it with all the other Joe Blogs and all the other village idiots.
Those idiots who see it and, like, well, that makes sense. It's got to be right. Read it online. Yeah. It is frightening what, like, men don't believe the clitoris actually exists. They don't believe that they don't believe that women are capable of having orgasms. One guy said, I think we're aliens now. One guy said that when a man's penis gets near the vagina of a woman, she is attracted to. He doesn't have to do anything because her body will, like the alien from the movie, will just kind of, like, absorb him into herself.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
It's frightening.
It sounds like a manga movie.
See, that's why these men need to stop watching so much weird porn.
Mm.
The misconceptions about how the woman's body works, and you can't convince them otherwise. Like, these guys come into these subreddits and they're like, change my view. 100 women will show up with opposing views, and then they're like, no, you're just not, you don't want us to know, you're keeping secrets.
Yeah,
The hive mind is making all of you.
You're the female hive mind.
And then they have a real hard problem with, because I think there was one study that said that women have a stronger in-group bias than men do. And they take that to mean that women will create this collective Borg versus what it actually is, meaning women will support one another and we're not always in competition with one another, where men won't want to be friends with guys they deem as competition for women's attention.
Yeah. That's why I don't have any male friends.
You guys are I think you're fine. It's from like a lot of men are like just aching for empathy from women when they give no empathy to women, and it's got to work both ways.
And it, like I was doing a post the other day about this, that because somebody tried to do one of those gotchas, because I was talking about the whole somebody had asked the question that if a woman has sex with a guy when they're both drunk, can she cry rape the next day and go to the police for it and make a rape allegation? And then I said, well, yeah, but realistically speaking, nothing's really going to come of it. She's going to be discouraged heavily by the police. I don't really see any prosecution wanting to take it on or anything like that because it's so ambiguous. Anyway, some bloke in the comments was like, oh, well, in that case, then I've been SA'd loads of times and all this stuff. So I did a video response to him saying, like, well, why, like, if this is true that this has happened to you, then surely you should have empathy and sympathy with the women that talk about this, because it's just as hard for men to talk about if they've been sexually assaulted or raped. It's just as hard for us to talk about it as it is for women, and we get treated like crap. So you should have, this is the one thing that we're not in competition on.
And there it's hard in different ways, I think, because women are not often believed, or they get what were you wearing, what were you doing there, whereas men, they get made fun of because, well, you were bigger and stronger, or she was good looking, I would have been all over that. It's like when you see stories about teachers who are assaulting their students, and when it's a male teacher assaulting a young female student, the comments from women aren't, "Ooh, well, he could do that to me anytime because look at how cute that teacher is." But when that story is a female teacher assaulting a male student, a lot of men in the comments are like, "What's he complaining about? That's goals." So it's a very different approach to how those things play out. Yeah.
And then the outcome's the same for both of us. It's traumatic, and then nothing ever gets done. And then it just continues to happen. So
that's fucked.
Yeah.
We're all fucked, which is why we need to be nicer to each other.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like there's a lot of so I'm stroking the cat at the same time as talking. I'm not very good at multitasking.
You pervert.
Yeah.
Cat's what he calls his penis. Just kidding.
Pictures to follow. And I just think like men and women have a lot more in common about a lot of these issues than either side wants to admit or even realizes, I think. Like it's shit for both of us in different ways, I guess. And a lot of, like, unless you're rich and famous, life is generally just miserable and crap.
And it's like a lot of these men in these posts have been saying is that it's never been easier, or women are the ones in control of dating, so it's easier for women to date. It's easier for even unattractive women to get sex. That's all what it really boils down to, is they don't care about the relationship that comes forward. They're just angry. Like a lot of them are legitimately angry that unattractive women can get sex easier than unattractive men. But it's if that's all that woman wanted, then that's fine. But a lot of women want relationships, and if they can't, it's just as difficult for men and women in both aspects of it. It's just difficult in different ways, and they just can't see past it. Like a lot of men are using language like, how are we not supposed to be resentful when women can get laid easier than men can? It's like, but you're not competing against women. Like if you want to go and sleep with the same guy she's sleeping with, that's your competition, but you can't be angry if you apply for one job and you don't get it because you're not qualified, you can't be angry at that employer for not hiring you. Apply for more jobs and apply for jobs for which you are qualified. You'll get that job.
There was a really simple game they got us to play in evolutionary psychology when I was at uni. And they basically lined a bunch of us up and they wrote down numbers and stuck them to our foreheads. And you didn't know what your number was, but you had to try and mate with the highest number that you could find. And eventually the numbers ended up in order. So one ended up with 2 because they couldn't find a higher number, because everyone's like, oh, 1. And then by the end of it, 1 ends up with 2, 3 ends up with 4, 5 ends up with 6.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was really interesting. And I think, like, you know, it's that kind of stuff that these guys need to be drawing on, that, you know, you got to figure out who you're competing with and also not think of it as competition. And I think that a note quick about like these dating apps is, like, originally, and even I used to think this, that they were going to be like a benefit for a woman, because then she was able to vet people before meeting them, and she's going to be able to think of like, be able to dip into a bigger pool of suitors, basically. But it seems to have had the opposite effect, that it's encouraging shit behavior from men. And like, but only on dating apps specifically, it means then that the women get conditioned to look for the wrong things that they wouldn't usually look for, because that's all you've got to go on the profiles. And then you're selecting these men in a way that you wouldn't select them in your natural environment. And
that's very true. And I think they get really angry that women can put filters through. So, I mean, I think we saw a video about that, after you shared it with me or vice versa, that a woman on a dating app can put her filter as a minimum of 6 feet, whereas in real life, she would be amenable to a man who is, 5'8", 5'10", because she's meeting him in that personality. But if you're just, it's like when I go back to the job, like I've been in positions where I've had to hire people. So I'll see 100 resumes. I'm not going to meet 100 people. So I just use arbitrary information to like whittle it down. And because there are so many more men on dating apps than there are women are doing the same thing. They're not going to vet 20 guys who show up in their DMs. They're just going to, okay, I'm going to pick 5 and then maybe I'll chat with them. And a lot of these men are really upset about that. And instead of trying to give themselves a competitive advantage by being more interesting, more well-read, better traveled, smarter, nicer, kinder, generous, instead of trying to do that, they just complain. They just give up, right? Instead of trying to make themselves likable, they just complain that nobody likes them.
Well, yeah, a good example of this actually is that I've spoken to a few women that want certain things changed in legislation to reflect the problems that we're having. One of them is they want the age of consent raised, which I support. And another one is that it needs to be recognized in law that a woman can rape a man. In the UK, a woman can't rape a man because rape is only done with the penis. And then so women are like, they've said to the MRAs on TikTok, like, I will start a petition, get a petition going, and I'll sign it, and let's do something. If you really care about men's health and men's wellness and men's outcomes, then you would do this. And then they just block her.
Yeah, they don't do it. And I've seen that a few times where men will talk about, how come this isn't happening for men? It's like, well, then what are you doing to change that? Because no one else is going to do it for you. Men didn't give women the right to vote because they felt sorry for us. We fought for it. And then there were men who supported women and who joined that fight. The LGBT, like, it wasn't straight people who were like, let's have a Pride Month. The LGBT community fought for that, and their straight allies joined them. So like, men need to start this movement, and then their women allies will join them. But we're not going to start it.
Look at do the hard work for us.
Can't. On the other side of that, however, I have seen a couple of videos that talk about how when men have tried to start men's only shelters, they were getting death threats and bomb threats, and they were being so. It sucks because when men do try to do things for men, there's that small group of haters and often radical feminists who will come in and be like, men can't have this space, but we'll fight for women to have their spaces. So there's got to be that balance of men can have this support space, this shelter for men, just as women can have it for women.
But the problem with though is that those guys who like to bitch, moan and complain and not do anything, they use that as an excuse not to do something. Yes. And it's like, okay, what do you think the suffragettes did when they kept getting told no? They kept getting the door shut in their face. They fucking kept trying. And that's what Stonewall did with Peter Tatchell. Like, they kept trying. You can't just go, oh, they don't want us to do it and they threaten us. For fuck's sake, every movement has had to struggle to get the voice heard.
Absolutely. There are movements that continue to struggle to get their voices heard, even though they've been around for forever.
It'll show you exactly what these guys are like. I mean, whenever I do a video about a woman's thing with sex offences, then I'll get the whataboutisms from that type of guy. And then as soon as I address what they're saying in the video about how bad it is for men, nothing, no response. They don't turn up in the messages or anything. They don't fucking care. And it's like,
and I think it comes back to the individual versus the group, where women will try to support the group, where men are like, what's in it for me? Because, and I saw this just recently. It was about something like medical care, right? Like men will fight for a certain medical advancement as long as it benefits them. And then as soon as they've been the recipient of that benefit, they no longer fight for it anymore because they got what they wanted out of it. Like I don't know that men enough try to better things for the next generation of men or for their brothers, essentially, whereas women will try to do those things for continue that fight for other women.
Yeah, there has to be like some kind of a critical mass, doesn't there? Like I've known this from like medical research that I've worked on, that a lot of the people that have an awareness and campaigning about things is because they or their direct loved one, like their partner or their kid, has had that problem. And then they will get involved, like they'll jump knee deep in or whatever and get involved. But it's really hard to engage people unless they have that direct experience. It comes all the way full circle back to our last episode about how like people won't believe a rape allegation unless they watch the rape happen.
And I have to say I'm guilty of the same thing. I started donating blood 8 years ago because my cousin passed away, and at one point she had said to me that like she wouldn't have survived as long as she had if it wasn't for blood donors. So that was my way of honoring her. But I could have been donating blood for the 25 years preceding that, but I started because I had a reason to. And I think and again, this is just anecdotal evidence based on a couple of videos that I've seen, whereas men will have that push to do a thing until they've gotten what they want out of it. And then they're like, okay, other men can fight for themselves. I fought for myself.
Yeah, I've done the bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good place to end it. Nice and happy.